Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healing Brain. This is our weekly webinar and podcast here at Doman International, where parents with children with special needs join from around the world and ask us their biggest and most pressing questions to help their children. And that's what we aim to do with this show to help parents of children with special needs achieve the impossible. And in today's session, we're going to be talking about how do you start a Doman Reading Program with your child, even if your child doesn't speak yet or has limited speech. So before we get into today's topic, just a couple of quick announcements. So Doman International's clinical team has many trips coming up soon. As many of you know, our headquarters are in Philadelphia in the United States, and we do have appointments available throughout the year. Colleen, when are the next available appointments for families in Philadelphia?
So we are currently scheduling for May and for June.
May and June.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, if people want to look later in the year, that's fine. But we have our spaces. Right now we're focusing on May and June appointments.
Perfect. So those we have available appointments in May and June in Philadelphia. We have trips coming up to our European center in Pisa, Italy later this month, the weeks of April 20th and 27th. We have a trip coming up to India where we're going to be seeing families in Bangalore and New Delhi, India in May, starting on May 11th. In June, we're going to have appointments in Melbourne, Australia. In July, we're going to be back at our European Center. So if you're interested in having an appointment in Europe, please contact us. There's just limited weeks where we see families at our European Center in July. In August, we'll be seeing families in New Zealand. And at the end of September, we'll be back in Serbia and Croatia. So, all right, let's jump into the topic of the day, and that is how do you start a Doman reading program with your child, even if your child has limited or no speech? So, I would say that when I bring up this topic with parents with children with special needs, usually the families will fall into one of two groups. One group will be parents who say that reading is a priority for their child. They'll say, my child has learning difficulties, or maybe their child has a diagnosis like Down syndrome or autism or cerebral palsy, where they've been told that learning challenges might be present in the future. And then there's a second group of families who say, my child is so delicate physiologically. My child has so many illnesses, is so weak physically that reading is kind of a dream for us in the future, but not something that we're presently focused on. And I would like to say that for both of these groups, hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll see why reading is important for your child. And of course, even for the families in the second group that feel like reading might be a dream, first of all, many of those children who might even deal with frequent illnesses love this program. They often view it as a kind of a thrill, a dessert in their daily life. And often what we can do is with our nutrition and oxygenation programs, help resolve those underlying physiological issues, and at the same time do a cognitive development program like we're going to be discussing today. So let me just talk for a second about why reading is so important. Well, reading is important for various reasons. First of all, from an obvious standpoint, you need to be able to read to succeed academically or in most jobs in life, right? So if we want to get a child to succeed in school, hopefully, and live an independent life where they can earn a living, reading is essential, right? Reading is essential not just for the purposes of reading, but even to teach a child how to write or type, they have to be able to read, right? So it's important for many, many cognitive and academic skills. Second of all, if we can teach a child to read, they can learn new things on their own, right? It's a great way to give a child a toolkit where now they can explore subjects, both fiction and nonfiction, on their own and learn about the world even when we're not around. It's a great thing to give a child. The third thing, and this might be the least obvious, is that reading is the visual form of language, right? So, for example, if I say to you the word truck, right, you hear that word, you understand it through the auditory pathway. But I could also show you this card, and your brain looks at that word, that large red word, and understands that word as truck, right? So reading is the visual form of language. And it turns out for many children with special needs, they are better visual learners than they are auditory learners. So they'll often learn things very quickly if you show it to them. If you say, this is a truck, they can learn it quickly. But if you say to them, hey, a truck is a large vehicle with up to 18 wheels, it's harder for them to grasp it. And so teaching them visually is a great way for them to learn quickly and effortlessly. And interestingly, when we show them the visual form of language, like we're doing right now, we often find that it helps the child's comprehension and also their speech development. Because now they're not just hearing language through the auditory pathway, they're also seeing it in written form. So they're seeing language both visually and auditorily. Children always learn faster the more sensory pathways we use to teach them. So if we're using both vision and hearing, they're going to learn faster than only hearing. Okay, now, probably some of the first things parents notice when they look at the Doman Reading Program is they say, oh, that's interesting. You're using very large red words. Why is that? It's because for many children, their vision is immature. And so using large print, bold, clear print is easy for them to see. And so very often when we show even children who didn't enjoy reading, for example, in school and failed to learn to read in school, when we show them large print, all of a sudden that child is interested, they're locked in, because now for the first time in their life, maybe they're seeing text clearly. It's easy for them to see. And okay, let's also talk about why do we show whole words instead of teaching phonetics, right? Which is what's often done at school. Well, phonetics is problematic for children with special needs for many reasons. The first is that it requires speech, right? So if you teach a child to read phonetically, first of all, you have to teach them the different sounds that every letter makes. Then you have to essentially test them by having them read things out loud, right? Where they go bicycle, like that, right? And for many children, they just don't have the developed speech to be able to do that, or they might lack confidence in their own speech. And so they may be unwilling to do that, even if they can talk. And we see children like this all the time who might be 12, 13, 14 years old, still not reading. And they're asked all the time to kind of sound out words phonetically, and they're not confident in it, and they don't enjoy it. Okay. So, and keep in mind, having a child read phonetically, you're having the child take their biggest weakness, which is speech, and asking them to use it for a visual ability. Reading is a visual ability. All of you looked at this word, and probably none of you actually said bicycle out loud. You looked at it and you knew immediately what it was, because reading is a visual ability. You don't have to be able to speak out loud to read. So in the Doman method, we don't ask children, first of all, to read out loud. And we don't teach them to read phonetically, which is often a failing way of teaching children to read. In fact, the phonetic form of teaching children with special needs to read fails so often, most children aren't even taught to read anymore, right? When many families come on to our program, the average child coming on to the Doman method is, 6 to 8 years of age and has usually been to school for maybe a couple of years. And parents will often tell us, oh, he's not even taught to read in school. And it's because the teachers, the success rates are so low, it's like, why even try, right? Or they'll just say, oh, the child doesn't talk, or doesn't talk enough. What's the purpose, right? Because again, their reading methodology is attached at the hip to speaking. Okay, so children can learn to read words thanks to a part of the brain called the visual word form area. The visual word form area is a small area in our visual cortex, which is responsible for recognizing words. So for example, when I show this word to you, what happens is information is carried from the eyes to the brain by a chain of neurons, and that information is sent to the visual word form area. And your visual word form area says, that's motorcycle. And that's how you're able to recognize that word. Fortunately, the visual word form area is developed at birth. So even babies and young children have a visual word form area. They're ready to start learning to read in the first year of life. Many parents are never aware of that because most people aren't aware of it. But they are ready to learn how to read. And so what we do is we show whole words because that's what is best for that visual word form area. And recently, in the last few years with the Doman method, we've really found that adding a card with a picture before the word really helps increase the child's interest and enthusiasm and retention, right? So for example, the way we would present this category is first we tell the child, what are the words we're about to look at? So we'd say, let's look at words of vehicles. Are you ready? All right. So van, truck, bicycle, motorcycle, taxi, and taxi. So I just showed you 5 pictures and 5 words. We always separate the pictures and the words, always. Because if very often you can buy kind of cheap flashcards on the internet and the picture and word will be on the same card. The problem is if we put a picture of a taxi and the word taxi underneath it, many children would just look at the picture and ignore the word underneath it. So we always keep pictures and words separated. So I just showed you a set of vehicles. I would show this set of cards to my child 3 times in a day. 3 times in a day, because children need repetition, just like adults do, to be able to learn something, right? So we would teach this 3 times in a day for up to a week to give the child the required number of repetitions. Okay, now, just because we're showing one category of words doesn't mean we couldn't show another. So here, for example, I have animals. So let's look at some animals. So this is bear, cheetah, beaver, puma, and puma. So you can have different subjects that are represented in different categories. The reason why we do different categories, like we do animals together and we do vehicles together, is because, first of all, children like to see information categorized. It's more interesting. Imagine if I showed you a set of cards and they were all random. It had the word cheetah and then afterwards lamp and then after that moon. Okay, it maybe not completely boring, but it's a lot more interesting to see things together that make sense. The other reason why showing categories is really useful is because our brain actually saves related information in close proximity in the brain. So it actually makes it easier to learn when information is categorized. So here we have a set. Here's the final set I'm going to show you. Here we have colors. Let me make sure I've got this right side up. Yes, I think I do. All right, so we've got, this is green, orange, yellow, blue, and blue. All right. Again, the reason why we use red print is red is actually the easiest color for the human eye to see. So it's very common. For example, I might even have, I saw a 1-month-old child a couple weeks ago, and I was showing him different color images. And as soon as I showed him the red color picture, this 1-month-old, his eyes just brightened up because that of all the colors was the easiest one for him to see. So, yeah, just to wrap up, this is the first step in the Doman Reading Program, which is single words. This is the way we start reading with children who cannot read or who might be slow or poor readers. We have many children come onto our program who are 12, 14, 16 years old, who have failed to learn to read in school, or maybe they read very slowly. And unfortunately, children who read slowly tend to dislike reading because it's hard and they read with low comprehension. But when we start to show single words to them, all of a sudden, their reading speed increases because they start to read words in their entirety rather than letter by letter. Because even if a child is taught to read phonetically, but they have speech problems, very often they won't read this word as blue. It'll be something like blue or something like that. And good luck, especially with a language like English, good luck trying to read phonetically. It's really, really difficult because of course, most languages have laws that govern them, but all languages, even mostly phonetic languages, do have exceptions. And then English, for example, is completely bizarre. If you look at English, for example, the letters GH, in the word ghost, GH makes a G sound. In the word tough, the letters GH make a F sound. And in the word though, GH is silent. So good luck, reading phonetically. And the truth is, most children that are taught to read phonetically, these are children without special needs, eventually their visual word form area kind of takes over and they start recognizing whole words. And that's how they're able to navigate a language which is very confusing, like English. But unfortunately, many children with special needs, because of neurological disorganization, aren't able to do that. So the best thing is for us to teach them in the way they learn fastest, which is by using whole words and teaching the visual word form area directly. Colleen, as someone who both learned to read with this program and has taught children to read with it, any additional thoughts that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think sometimes parents are told that, oh, well, if your kid doesn't know how to sound it out, they won't be able to figure out new words. But it's been my experience and the experience of a lot of people I know and with my own daughter that if you teach kids, we're not trying to make them memorize words. You have to remember that you're showing them enough words that they're forming the connections between the different words, and this one sounds like this and this one sounds like that, and they begin to intuit, as you said, Spencer, that word form area takes over. And so you can trust that process, parents, because it has been working for a very, very long time. And so if anybody's saying to you, oh, your kid won't be able to sound out new words, they will. They absolutely will. And the truth is, there's actually I have a funny experience that was personal. When I was 8 years old, 7 or 8, I guess, I had seen the word Arkansas, but I don't think I had ever had it shown to me and pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew, so I was in this like classroom quiz thing, and I knew the answer was Arkansas. I raised my hand, I gave the answer, but I said Arkansas.
Yeah.
And a couple of my classmates laughed because they knew that it was a mistake, and others were like, "Where's Arkansas?" And my teacher just said, "Oh, it's actually pronounced. You're right, but it's actually pronounced Arkansas." It's like, huh, okay. And the funny thing was, because I was already such a good reader, I was very familiar with words that looked and sounded completely different. So when she let me know that, I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
accepted
yeah,
it and I
exactly. It
moved
was no
on. But
surprise.
yeah,
Mhm.
so that's something else to keep in mind, is that kids are taking in that information, but when new information comes in to correct their pronunciation, they accept that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At
absolutely.
least
And
English speakers do.
yes. Yeah, exactly. So just to, if you want to learn more about this subject of reading, so there are chapters in our books in the Doman Method, From Special Needs to Wellness and Answering Autism. There's one chapter that I wrote for both books on how to start a reading program, which goes into more depth on the subject. So I do recommend you get one of those books. And of course, if you wanted to do a deeper dive, you could see my grandfather's book, How to Teach Your Baby to Read. This book really outlines, the reading program, starting with words all the way going to books. And of course, for virtually every child who comes to the Doman International Clinic, we will begin a reading program. The only exception are children who might be blind due to brain injury. And with those children, we do an intense visual stimulation program to get them seeing. And then once they start seeing, we begin a reading program with them. So virtually every child we see is taught with our reading program. And we are very proud of having an over 95% success rate in getting children reading on the program. And when I say getting them reading, I don't just mean reading a few words, but also being able to demonstrate in front of their parents and in front of our clinical evaluator that they're able to differentiate words and recognize words. All right. Well, I think we can jump into questions now. Whether you're joining us on Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook, you can type your questions into the comments box and we will answer them in order. Colleen, I understand we have some pre-submitted questions.
Yes.
So why don't we begin with those first?
Absolutely. So we have a question from Michaela. She wants to know, can your method support and help ADHD and DLD? Is that developmental learning or?
Maybe developmental learning disability would be my guess.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes to both. And I would say it's quite common that we see children that have both of those diagnoses or something similar to that. And so and this is really a great time for Michaela to be asking this question because we've just started with the reading program. And we have a ton of success, Michaela, with, the getting a child successful in the foundational cognitive skills like reading, writing, and math. So, just to give everyone an example, last week we had a 10-year-old child who started our program nonverbal, diagnosed with autism. And last week he achieved a typing victory, meaning he can now type in words and sentences anything he thinks or wants to say completely independently. No one, guiding him or helping him with spelling, completely on his own. So that's a game changer for a child, right? To be able, he can now, mom can open any book and read a sentence for him and he can type it, or she can say to him, what do you want to do this weekend? And he'll type, I want to go to grandpa's house or something like that. And that's just a game changer. So with those foundational learning skills, Michaela, we're very, very proud of our results, reading, math, writing, and typing. And when we look at attention deficit disorder or hyperactivity disorder, focus and concentration are two common challenges that children have when they begin our program. And what we do is through a combined effort of different nutritional programs. So that means making certain dietary changes, but also introducing supplements that help brain function. We can often reduce the hyperactivity and focus issues. We also have certain both sensory programs and programs that stimulate the vagus nerve, which is very important for emotional regulation and feeling calm. We have programs to stimulate both the sensory areas and the vagus nerve that helps reduce hyperactivity and improve calm and focus. So I think, Michaela, you're in the right place. And I definitely recommend, if you haven't talked to Colleen yet, jumping on a call with her and learning more about the program.
I'm going to reach out. I haven't spoken with her yet. So
okay, great.
Yeah. All right. So, I see we've got a comment here from Myra.
Oh, yeah. Myra says, can't wait for you to evaluate Oscar after many years on the reading program. Oh, yeah. I look forward to it, too. Yeah. Looking forward to seeing what he shows us. See you in July or August?
July.
Okay, perfect. See you in July, Myra.
All right. We have a question here from Ludwin. Says, my daughter is hypotonic and has sensory deficits following a recent craniotomy. How does the Doman method clinically ensure that intensive physical patterning won't cause structural damage or increase intracranial pressure? And what specific medical criteria do you use to determine when a post-surgical patient is ready for your physical program? Do you have this method in your experience? Will my daughter, if we wait, will my daughter have good results?
Okay. Very good question. And Colleen, I'll probably need you to make sure I answer each part of it.
You got it.
So, let's start with after surgery. How do we determine if a child's ready to start the program? That would be done through the help of our medical team. So, every child, when they come for an initial appointment at our clinic, whether it's Philadelphia, Europe, wherever it is in the world, we always have our medical director in that region see the child and then inform our clinical staff what is possible to start and what isn't possible to start. When it comes to now, this parent obviously knows somewhat about our program because he's asking about the patterning program. And patterning is very helpful for some of the symptoms you mentioned, like hypotonia. Okay. For any child with a mobility issue, patterning would be helpful. Now, he asks about the concern about hydrocephalus. And there was one other thing. The concern about could it create some kind of physical issue. And so we have done patterning for 70 years, right? And during that time, we have learned where we need to be most careful, right? So if we take, for example, hips, many children with muscle tone issues, they're more prone to have hip issues where they might have a dislocated hip, right? Or a subluxed hip. And so with these children, so for example, with your child who is hypotonic, we have certain safeguards to do patterning and also protect the hips. Like we have something called the hip bolster, which protects the hips. On occasion, with certain children, we might ask for certain testing. This is not done in all cases, but we might ask for a neck x-ray, for example, just to make sure that the turning of the head during patterning is safe. But again, these are things that our medical director would know to look for and would check when a child comes to our clinic. We are, just like anyone involved in health, and especially in children's health, the number one rule is do no harm. That's the number one rule, do no harm, right? So we are very, very careful not to do anything that could potentially harm a child. Now, patterning itself, when you look at the individual movements in patterning, none of them are extreme, right? They involve a child's arms and legs moving up above the head and to the side. It involves the legs, bending and moving, upward into a kind of 90-degree angle. The head is turned from side to side, right? So these are movements that most children are making hundreds of times just normally on a daily basis. What makes patterning special is the coordination of the movements, right? Of the two sides of the brain being stimulated together. And so for the vast majority of children, patterning poses absolutely no risk. It's incredibly safe. It's probably one of the safest programs that I know of. But to this father's point, that's why we always have every child checked by a medical doctor. And we've become very, very good at making sure to protect children, for example, with their hips or other parts of their body when it comes to patterning. We also use a lot of quality control where we have parents do the activities in front of us and we check. We have parents send us videos so we can coach parents along the way, even when they're at home, to make sure everything's being done in the proper way. Colleen, I feel like there might be a couple more elements to this question maybe I haven't touched on yet.
Well, Deb mentioned craniotomy, that she had a craniotomy recently. So that's the specific surgery. So I guess there's a concern there.
Sure. And that's a reasonable concern, right? Especially with an activity like patterning where we do touch the head. And so keep in mind what we would do is, especially if a child pretty recently had surgery and our medical director said, listen, this child is not ready for this activity. Our clinical team says, that's fine, because we've got 50 other activities that we could do with that child that fit the criteria that we could do safely with the child. I often say on this webinar that we have, the last time we sat down and counted every treatment we use in the Doman method, it was over 400. So, if we, our medical director says, or even if a doctor, the child's doctor at home says, this child cannot do this activity, we would just say, okay, here are other activities we can do it instead that will help the child in their mobility development. Yeah.
Very, very flexible. I think a lot of families, it's one of the benefits of having had the Doman method around for 70 years. People have heard of aspects of it, which is great. But sometimes when I talk to parents, they come there, they say, oh, I've heard about this particular activity, but I feel like my kid wouldn't be able to do that. I can't do the Doman method because you have to do that, is what I've heard. I said, no. We're going to specifically design a program that's right for your child. And if your child can't do one of these activities, those aren't the Doman method all by themselves,
Yeah. And I think that because we are a kind of holistic method, sometimes certain people will think that means that we are not conservative. And I would actually say we are quite conservative. We're really, really careful in everything that we decide to do. And sometimes I'm personally shocked by, some new treatment will show up on the market that doesn't have a lot of, many years behind it. It's kind of a new drug, a new therapy, a new treatment. And people just jump right into it, because I understand people are desperate to address certain health issues. But if you look at, for example, how many doctors prescribe off-label medication use for kids, they'll just say, oh, this kid has a problem here. This medication is meant for adults for something else, but try this medication. Very often that can lead to disastrous effects, so I think we're really, really careful. If anything, maybe a little too careful sometimes, but you really can't be when you're dealing with kids.
Exactly. All right. Yeah, I think we covered the whole question. So I will make sure to get in touch with Lidwin, send this recording, and we can go from there.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, for everything he mentioned, even for a child who's post-op, or I would say even especially for a child who's post-op, that our program is really helpful for children and adults who have sustained brain injury. And so I think it can be a very helpful part of the rehab process.
Yes. Yeah, that is so true. All right. I see that Annabella has a question for us.
Oh, yeah. Annabella is saying, what is the best way to evaluate reading and know if a child is truly understanding what they read? Very, very good question. So, Annabella, when we're evaluating reading, we're, first of all, in almost all cases, we're not going to ask the child to read out loud because, as I said, many children are nervous to do that, right? So if we take the most simple, I know, Annabella, your child has had the Doman method for quite some time, but just to start on maybe a simple basis, we would start by evaluating a child by giving visual choices like this, like saying, can you show me where's the word yellow, right? And this is called a direct question, where you're holding up two choices and saying, where's the word yellow? Now, when you ask a question like that, you're just checking recognition ability. You're just seeing, can the child hear the word yellow and find which one of these is yellow, okay? Now, that's very helpful to see if a child can read words. Now, you also asked, what if you wanted to know if they understood what they read? That's another layer, right? So in those kind of cases, I would ask the child an indirect question. So for example, I would say, hey, what's the color of a banana? That's an indirect question, right? I'm not saying the word out loud. I'm just saying, which of these is the color of a banana? And if the child is able to point to or look at the word yellow, that means not only is the child reading the word yellow, they're able to understand, they're taking another kind of mental leap. They understand that yellow is the color of the banana. I did this recently. I was in New Zealand with a 16-year-old teenager named Lily. And she had done 6 months of our reading program. And parents wanted to know, could she read words? And she was 100% correct with words, asking her to, where's the word blue? She answered 100%. And the mom said to me, but how do we know if she's really understanding? And so I went into all indirect questions, right? So if she looked at the, for example, you could take two animals like this, say to the child, all right, which of these animals is the fastest animal on earth, right? Runs the fastest. Or you could say, which one of these has spots? Okay, those are indirect questions. And by the way, indirect questions are often much more interesting for children because, just saying, where's the color blue? It gets kind of boring. But once you start asking them to problem solve a bit more, they get more interested. Yeah. And keep in mind, Annabella, for a child like Vanessa, who's not just gotten words, but also seen sentences in books, you can also do direct and indirect questions with pages of books. For example, you could hold up 2 pages from 2 different homemade books and say, okay, which one of these pages are about elephants, right? You could ask a question like that, which requires the child to read both sentences, and then they show you which one is which. All right, Colleen, do we have any other pre-submitted questions?
We do, actually. We have several.
Okay.
So I have one from Julie. She said, my child is a cerebral palsy child going through an NDT program 6 times a week for 6 hours. She's still unable to attain independent balance for standing. She walks with a walker. How can she attain independent standing, balance, and walking? She has very little speech with 10 to 12 words. How can I improve her speech?
Mm-hmm. And there's no information here from Julie if the child can crawl or creep, correct?
No, unfortunately.
Okay.
And nothing else.
Yeah. Julie, we're really proud with the Doman Method of having an over 50% success rate in getting children to walk with our program who weren't able to walk before. And maybe to an outside observer, 50% may not sound amazing, but when you just compare our results with any other treatment program out there, most treatment programs don't even calculate what percentage of children learn to walk on the program because so few do. They don't want to keep those statistics. So we have a long history of helping kids learn to walk. And we usually do it through a combined approach where, first of all, we use a program called Glenn's Ladder to teach a child how it feels to walk, how to control their balance with their brain and walk, on their own using the ladder. So we do that to stimulate the walking ability. But at the same time, we found that we need to make sure that the lower levels of the brain that are responsible for mobility are fully developed. Because if those lower areas of the brain are not fully developed, it's kind of like trying to build a house on a faulty foundation, right? If you build a house on a faulty foundation, the house will never really stand well, right? And so what we need to make sure, and this is why I asked Colleen if your child crawls or creeps, is we found that crawling on the belly and creeping on the hands and knees are essential milestones, essential to get a child to walk, because they develop a low area of the brain called the midbrain, which is very important for coordination and balance. If a child doesn't crawl or creep, I don't want to say it's impossible to teach the child how to walk, but your chances of getting the child to walk are much, much, much less. And we've just seen that over the last 70 years. My grandfather, Glenn Doman, who started this program, was a physical therapist. And so getting children to walk who couldn't walk was his life's mission. And he passed that down to future generations of our staff. So that's what we do, Julie. We we would take a multi-prong approach, let's say, of using Glenn's ladder to teach standing and walking, and then using crawling and creeping and balance development activities to help make sure that foundation is secure to help your child learn how to walk. Colleen, were there other things in this question that I still need to touch on?
I think, well, also has very little speech with 10 to 12 words. How can I improve her speech?
Yeah. Well, mobility and speech development are very much connected. If you think about it, a child between 1 and 3 years of age goes from, just taking those first steps to running, right? Between 1 and 3 years, a few steps to they can run across a football field without the slightest bit of effort. If you look at speech development, average 12-month-old says maybe 2 words. But by the time they're 3 years of age, they have over 2,000 words. So walking and running really help build respiration, breathing ability, which is so important for the ability to get out speech development. So, of course, we do have individual speech programs, Julie, for children like your child, speech development activities that can help spur speech. But I also want to point out the more or the sooner we can get your child walking, we'll also see as your child starts walking, better speech development. Recently, I was with my mom, who's been doing this for 45 years and is in our mobility development department. I'm in the cognitive development department. And she was speaking to a mom who, knows about the Doman method, but isn't really implementing it consistently. And the mom was just picking my mom's brain on, her child. And she said, my son is 2 years old. His speech is slow compared to his peers. What's your number one recommendation for my child? My mom said, bring him out for a 20-minute walk every day. And this mom was kind of surprised by how simple the instruction was. So she said, all right, thanks a lot, I'll do it. And 2 weeks later, she said, wow, she contacted my mom and said, wow, my child is talking so much more, much larger vocabulary, starting to string words together. So it is really, really impressive how important walking and running is to speech development. But Julie, we do have to take a holistic approach. So that's why if with your child on the Doman method, we'd give both a physical program and a speech development program. Yeah. And I definitely recommend that Julie talks to you, Colleen.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to be in touch. All right. Thank you. So we have one from Rochelle. Rochelle wants to know if there is speech delay, is it autism?
Not necessarily. For various reasons. First of all, there are many children who they might have maybe some mild neurological developmental issues that present as a speech delay, but they don't have other symptoms that are commonly kind of linked with an autism diagnosis, like hyperactivity or problems with focus and concentration, problems with eye contact, balance or coordination issues. So yeah, just because a child has speech delay doesn't necessarily mean they have autism. Now, I do want to say we actually don't diagnose children as being autistic at Doman International. We feel that autism is often a label that is given to children with just a set of symptoms. And by the way, I see children come to our clinic all the time where one doctor told the parents the child has autism and another one said the child has ADHD and another one said they have speech delay. And it just kind of depends on the professional you get and the day and the checklist they're using. But what matters much, much more than whatever diagnosis the child is given is the understanding. Parents need to understand that this is a issue with brain development. It's not some mysterious disease called autism. It is a problem of certain areas of the brain are not fully developed. And what we need to do is stimulate the brain with a holistic treatment program to create neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change. And when we do that, the symptoms start to go away.
All right, great. Okay, and finally, another question about speech. This is from RT. RT wants to know how Doman's technique will help my child in building speech and language.
Yeah, it's interesting because we actually had last week's episode. We did a whole thing on speech development. So I do recommend, I think it was Julie and RT, maybe go back and check out what we talked about last week. I went over several exercises. Was it last week, Colleen, or was
I
it
think
2
it might have
weeks
been
ago?
2 weeks ago.
It was
Yeah,
2
but
weeks
I can
ago.
send the recording.
Yeah, thank you. I'd appreciate that. Because now in that webinar, I discuss, I think, 3 different activities that can be powerful for speech development. At this point, we have dozens that we use, but those 3 are a very good place for parents to start. And they are easy to begin even at home. So yeah, I would definitely recommend doing that. We also do have, if you want additional speech resources, I don't think I said this before, in the book, The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, I'm going to give you the chapter number. Chapter 10 is on enhancing speech development. Okay, if your child has a ADD or autism diagnosis, in the book Answering Autism, there's also a whole chapter on speech development. So these are really good resources to learn more. The webinar, and I'd recommend talking to Colleen too.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is reminding me of something that came up last week, and it comes up a lot with parents that I talk to. This mother, though, was saying that her child was born with Down syndrome, but then as he got older, he was handed a diagnosis of autism. He was handed a diagnosis of both, I guess it was speech delay first, then it was autism, then it was there was something else in there too, maybe learning disabled, whatever. And the mother was saying, she said, I kept thinking that if we found labels that they would come with answers. And she said they haven't come with answers. It's just really more of the same. She said, because my son was born with Down syndrome, we were in sort of the therapy mode from the get-go. But she said, as these other labels kept being added to his life, it goes, oh, well, a little more speech therapy, a little more. And she said, I've realized that none of this is really getting to the heart of what's going on with my son. That's why I started looking for other answers. So, it just, but I think that happens a lot with families. Unfortunately, your child is growing. You don't know that there's any kind of problem. And then there starts to be a problem. And you're thinking, okay, so what do we do when something is a problem? We go to the experts, we get the name of the disease, right? And then we get the treatment. But in the case of kids with special needs, that doesn't really work that way because the names of the disease are not accurate anyway. They're not describing where the issue is, and they just come with,
Right.
everybody's trying their best, certainly. But
Right.
it seems like a lot of families, unfortunately, spend time going down dead ends,
Yeah.
hoping to get the right answer before they realize, oh, this is not the right answer.
Yeah, my mom was telling me that when she started this work in the 1970s, very often children with autism, the way doctors would explain it is they said, oh, they had refrigerator moms, meaning like mothers who were so cold and unloving that the children got autism because of lack of maternal care. So you just had a whole generation of mothers who were basically told your child has autism because you're a bad mom. And my mom, being in special education in the early 70s, before she found the Doman Method, was just witness to the terrible guilt that was passed down to mothers through that. And, of course, today, I don't think that is happening, although unfortunately, because we work with families from 80 different countries around the world, I do know there is a stigma in certain countries around neurodevelopmental issues, but fortunately much less than there was before. But there's still a great lack of helpful resources that parents are actually given. Yeah.
Yeah, so for families who are tuning in, if you're just exploring the Doman method, please know that we have a lot of answers for you. We have a lot of perspective, and we are different, but it's a good thing. You wouldn't have found us if you weren't looking for something different. And even in small ways, we can make big changes for your kid and benefit you.
Yeah, over the last 70 years, the Doman Method has helped thousands of children learn to walk, talk, and succeed in school and life. And we really, one of the important differences, I think, in our program is that we understand the innate intelligence of children and their great potential. And so we really help parents discover that. And it's one of the most common things that we're told by parents. I didn't know my child was ever capable of doing this thing. I mentioned earlier a 10-year-old boy with autism last week who's typing independently. The mom just never thought that was even remotely possible. And now he gets to show everyone just how smart he is. And it's not just about teaching the families the programs. It's about going through the process hand in hand with them and supporting them along the way and making sure that any questions or obstacles parents face, we help them through. Because there are going to be obstacles. There are some parents who join this webinar weekly who have been doing our program for a couple of years now. And yet they keep joining the webinar because life is life and things are going to happen. And especially when you're working with a child, one day they may love doing something and the next day they decide they don't want to do that anymore. And so something new has to be done, or they need to be motivated in a new way, or parents encounter issues, that they just haven't witnessed before. And so, but that's where experience is really, really helpful, because it's rare at this point. There are sometimes new things that will present themselves to our team. But when you have a team that has been trained, now we consider it like the third generation Doman Method team, because my grandfather started in the 1950s and he kind of passed that knowledge down to the next generation. And then that next generation is still passing down the knowledge to my generation of staff. So you learn a lot, because you also learn not just through your own clinical experience, but from the clinical experience of the people that have come before you. And that's really, really important. And so sometimes there are things that present themselves that are still new, right? That's going to happen. But most of the time, after 40,000 families, you've seen almost everything there is to see. So we've learned a lot along the way.
Yeah, I think that helps parents to know as well, because we talk to many families who say, I was told by my doctor that they've never seen a kid like my kid, or that my child now has a diagnosis, a rare genetic condition that only 10 kids in the world have. In our experience, because of the more sophisticated testing, more children are being diagnosed with things that they did have before, but they weren't diagnosed because those tests didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
So for families to know that when they come to work with us, we're never casual about it. We're not like, it's no problem, we got it. But we're like, yeah, your kid is not an outlier kind of, no parent wants to be told your kid is the only one with this particular issue. It's like, so who knows how to help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see here, I think we've got a couple of comments on Instagram and then we can wrap up. So I see a comment here from Yanin who says, regards from Cuba, the Cuban team that validated the developmental profile. I can assure that as a neurologist. Yeah, thank you, Yanin.
Wow. Thank you.
We use a developmental profile to evaluate every child that comes to our clinic. And we've been using it for 60 years to evaluate where children have challenges with brain development, and then what are the best programs. We use that scale to help us with recommending a treatment program for the families. So thank you very much, Janine. We have a question here from Paulinha who says, is the Doman method in Brazil already? So we have Brazilian families on the Doman International program currently. I know my wife Melissa on Friday was talking to one of them on the phone. And then we also have Brazilians who live not just in Brazil, but also around the world. Like we have a lot of Brazilians here in the US who also do our program. My grandfather, Glenn Doman, actually, one of his closest partners was someone named Raimundo Veras, who was a doctor in Brazil, who found the program actually because of an injury that his son had experienced. And he did the program with his son. And through doing the program, his son was able to regain use of his hands and arms. And then he convinced my grandfather to, kind of help bring the program to Brazil. And also he was instrumental in beginning our program with children with Down syndrome and other genetic conditions. And so we always, for that reason, lovingly call children with Down syndrome Veras children in honor of him. Because also the researcher that Down syndrome is named after, Down, didn't actually respect children with Down syndrome. He thought they were, idiots and called them names. So why should we name a group of people after someone who resented them? It's a little bizarre. So we say, okay, so amongst our staff, we call these children Veras children in honor of the man who brought the Doman method to children with genetic conditions and got really excellent results. So Pauline, to answer your question, absolutely. Colleen, could you share your contact information for people who, I should have brought it up earlier, but I forgot to.
So my phone number, and you can message me there. I have WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, or you can SMS, whatever's best, or just call me. Is country code 1-814-232-8668. That is my direct number. And then if you want to email me, my direct email is info@domaninternational.org. So INFO, and that comes to me. It doesn't go through anything else. So please contact me directly and we can talk about the program.
Yeah, and just one final thought. In addition to recommending everyone reaches out to Colleen, especially all the people who submitted really great questions earlier. I want to say that these episodes are now being uploaded to Spotify. So if you use Spotify to listen to podcasts or music, if you look up The Healing Brain, you can find, something like our last 10 episodes. And that includes not just audio, but video as well, if you want to watch them. So check that out. But you can also go back on YouTube, on our Doman International's YouTube page or Facebook page, and find them there as well. All right. Well, Colleen, thank you so much for joining me. Let me just quickly announce, I have to look up what our next week's subject is going to be. So next Monday at the same time, we're going to be discussing, can the Doman method help nonverbal children? So, especially because we got a lot of questions today about speech development, we can go into more kind of practical recommendations next week about speech development.
Fabulous.
All right. Colleen, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. See you back here next Monday. Bye-bye.